Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons & Dragons, and we're going to talk about Session Plus. All right, so what is Session Plus? Well, Session Plus is a special thing. It's a special style of play. It's a Dungeons & Dragons play tool that I have envisioned, that I'm trying to get off the ground and get into Dungeons & Dragons. Wait, Scott, how do you get something into Dungeons & Dragons? Well, we know if you're a dungeon master or a player. Well, there's a path. We've already seen it, right? So Session 0, this already happened with Session 0. So the path to get something included into Dungeons & Dragons is you talk about it, you explain it, you exhibit it for 7 years outside of Dungeons & Dragons, and then Dungeons & Dragons goes, oh my gosh, this has taken over the entire tabletop role-playing game scene. We'll put it into Dungeons & Dragons now, 7 years later. Right? Like so basically, it took about 7 years to get Session 0 into Tasha's, and then what they'll do is whatever you put forward, as long as you talked about it fully, you explained it, you exhibited it, it showed up at lots of conventions, and it took the tabletop role-playing game industry by storm. It'll show up in D&D 7 years later. So that's what I'm doing right now. So I am introducing Session Plus right now. I don't think anybody else is using Session Plus for what I'm using it for. Let me know if they are. We'll see if we need a new name. I don't think we do. Session Plus. So let me explain what Session Plus is. Okay, so first of all, Session Plus is a specific tool designed to improve Dungeons & Dragons play, to be used now by Dungeon Masters and Dungeons & Dragons players before it's implemented into the game, right? And so this is my intention. I'm putting it here. I'm hoping for the best. And here we go. So let me explain what Session Plus is to you. All right, so everybody knows what Session 0 is, right? It's you get together as a group of players, you talk about your fears, and essentially you hold a committee to have a Dungeons & Dragons campaign. And then supposedly that produces a better play experience, and lots of people on different areas will tell you that's the case. But Session 0 is part of Dungeons & Dragons now. It came in Tasha's Guide to Everything, and I think we need Session Plus now. All right, so what is Session Plus? So first of all, you cannot have Session Plus if you don't have a Playmaster. Okay, you need a Playmaster to have a Session Plus. All right, so let me explain what a Playmaster is. So a Playmaster is the same as a Dungeon Master, but it's on the play side. You are taking your Dungeons & Dragons players, setting a hierarchy for them, and making one of them a Playmaster. That Playmaster aggregates the concerns of the player group to the Dungeon Master. By the way, Playmaster is also my invention. And if you don't, and you're, I'll explain what it is. But if you're not fully content with my explanation, this video is part of a playlist that you could click the playlist and get the full context, right? But there's more than enough for you to understand it here. So Playmaster is it does three things. They AEI, okay? They aggregate the play experience for specifically for the player group, right? So like Sally's got a problem with the way Rebecca DMs, right? And so rather than Rebecca squawking at the DM, Sally as the Playmaster comes and says, we the player group have a concern. It has a very polite conversation that's aggregated, so that not every player is just squawking their nonsense concerns or their full sense concerns to the Dungeon Master. It's an aggregated voice. They also exhibit stellar play, and they improve the play of everybody at the table. So you need a Playmaster to have Session Plus, okay? Once you have a Playmaster, that Playmaster will then conduct Session Plus, okay? Now, a campaign. Let's talk about a typical campaign. First of all, sadly, Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition campaigns are usually 6 sessions long. That's terrible and horrifying. But one of my recent campaigns was 24 sessions long, right? So let's use that as a template, right? So let's say you're gonna have a 24 session campaign, okay? This ain't the 80s. Don't squawk at me about 7-year campaigns. This don't happen anymore, right? By and large, it's just like people get abducted by aliens, they win the lottery, they move, right? Like 7-year campaigns aren't a real thing, right? So let's say 24 sessions, right? So in a 24 session, you might have a Session Plus at Session 1 Plus. So Session 1 occurs of the game, and then you have a Session 1 Plus, which you'd hold the Session 1 Plus between session 1 and session 2. You might have another one at session 5, so you'd have a session 5 plus. You might have another one at session 8 plus. You might have another one at session 11 plus. You might have another one at session 14. You might have another one at 17, and then you might have one at 20, 22, and one more at 23 before the game closes out at 24, right? So you might have 6 or 8 session pluses in a campaign, right? Now, what prompts a session plus, okay? So first of all, it's a great idea to have a session plus after the first session, okay? Now, let's talk about session pluses, okay? First of all, they are organized specifically by the playmaster. Now, this gets crazy, okay? The playmaster is to be trusted by the players, and they will pull together all or a subset of the players for the session plus sessions. Not all players may be included in the play session, in the session plus sessions, or in all session plus. So not all players will be going to every session plus session, okay? And the reason why is it may not be needed. When you are playing in a campaign, you will have a variance across your player group, right? Let's say you have 5 players for your campaign, okay? You're going to have, now, one of your players is likely to be an incredible note taker. We're going to take the playmaster out, okay? So that leaves 4 players, right? You're probably going to have one experienced player who takes notes and is absolutely fantastic as a Dungeons & Dragons player. You might have one knucklehead who is a whole world of trouble, right? But happens to be the boyfriend of one of the major players, right? And you're going to need them at the table because they suck as a Dungeons & Dragons player, right? And you need to fix him, right? You need to do 50 different things. You may just have him at session 1, right? And say, hey, we're holding this, and we're going to, or you may have him and you may have his girlfriend and the two of them together, right? And the playmaster will, so what do they do in play, okay? In the session 1 play? There's tons of stuff that can be done in the session plus, right? So first of all, if I didn't say this, I got to say this now. Session pluses never, ever include the Dungeon Master, okay? These are periods where the players are getting together and talking amongst themselves to make their play experience better, okay? They are fixing things so that they are specifically, they are taking care of issues that are just distinct to them. What are some of these issues? Player builds, right? The absolute worst time to talk about a player character's character build. Oh, you took this feat, and I should have taken this feat, and you should have put your points in this attribute, and all blah, 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 blah. I hate this nonsense, but trust and believe, a lot of players don't. A lot of players care very, very carefully about player balance, like, are we covering all the roles? Do we have a cleric? Do we have a rogue? Do we have a fighter? Do we have a wizard? Are you playing a good build for your fighter, right? The worst time possible to have those discussions is at the table during a session. Leave that to the session plus, right? Now, I don't like this type of talk, and I don't, I would really be much happier if every player left every other player to play their freaking character, even if they're getting it wrong, right? But there's a lot of players and good players who care about player build. Session Plus is the perfect place to do these player build conversations, right? And you want to say, hey, I think if you did this, if you took this feat and then you did this with your next level, and when you're in the game, hey, don't forget to add your proficiency, and and let me explain how this works, and also I can combo with this. This player character can combo with this. This Session Plus is the perfect place to have this conversation, right? And it's perfect to not have your Dungeon Master there. Your Dungeon Master has a million things to do, and she does not need to be wasting time on talking about player builds, right? And actually, I'll tell you right now, I think Dungeon Masters who get involved in player builds are suck Dungeon Masters. It is bad form, right? Let your player, it's the only thing your players control, right? So don't be bringing up your squawk DM nonsense. teaching them how to play their characters. It's the one thing you're supposed to keep your silly mitts off of. Stay out of their business on that. It is very, very important that DMs do not discuss player builds with player characters. It is bad form, and you, as a player, should know. It's hard to find DMs in this world, so don't go getting rid of them. But no, it is a sign that you are with a bad dungeon master if they are trying to correct your player builds. It is a megalomaniac, control freak action, and that trust and believe the DM seat draws control freaks like moss to a flame. Okay, so like just know it's bad form, and you got a problem with your DM if they're trying to constantly deal with fixing your player build. It's a very bad problem. Okay, what else can you do here, right? The other thing you could do is you could talk as players about who and what your player characters are and set priority on whose goals will matter when you hit the table. Okay, yes, you are a secret prince noble, your player character, right? You're an urchin, but secretly you're a prince, right? Is that the one? Is that the story that we as player groups are going to prioritize? Because over there, right, our tiefling bard's mother was murdered by flumps, right? And are we going to go burn the flump village to the ground in revenge? Is that the backstory that we're going to prioritize? And so basically, another thing you can do with the Session Plus is have a big old gab session without the Dungeon Master where you guys learn about yourselves and your narrative and all of that material, right? And then you decide among a group, right? I would do it democratically. I would literally vote and do an open vote, right, to whose story gets prioritized in this campaign, right? And then get this, when you get resolution on a story, you as the player need to shut your mouth and your story doesn't come up next, right? Somebody else's story gets prioritized, right? And you got your resolution on yours, so we don't really care that you had a lost magical cat, right? Like, you already got, we already restored you to your, you got your prince crown. You got that resolution. You don't get another one until somebody else gets theirs, right? And then you work through the group and you prioritize the narratives, right? Very powerful, very correct. That's player build actions, that's narrative priority, and also shoot the short. Just sit down and shoot the short together as players, right? And what's that going to do? You're not going to shoot the short when you get to the table, right? You're going to use your Dungeon Master's beautiful, valuable time for gameplay, right? But you shooting the short and talking about Batman and talking about Yoda and talking about puppets and talking about cats, right? And it has nothing to do with Dungeons & Dragons. But y'all needs to do it. Y'all love each other. You're all like part of a team. And that's good time too, right? That's a Session Plus. This thing needs to go into... So it is 2022 right now, and I'm intending this to be in Dungeons & Dragons by 2029. Get on it, Watsy. Oh, that's my opinion. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.